This is Resonance 104.4 FM. Flipping marvellous. How are you? Tis I, once more, Nicholas of Hennegan, coming at you with another slice of literary London, both on Resonance and, of course, now on bohemianbritain.com, and also on YouTube, because if you're listening in stereo, you'll know we're in vision. Oh, yes, we are. We're in vision. And I'm very pleased indeed to welcome another writer. We often talk to writers on Literary London, as you know. And Elika Ansari has written a book, a kind of very topical book at the moment called The Five Stages of Moria. Hello, Elika.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. It's taken ages to arrange this as well because of me being a bit of an idiot. But at last you're here. So tell us, just tell us a bit about the book because it's very topical at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, so the book is called The Five Stages of Moria, and the subtitle, in quotation marks, is The Worst Refugee Camp on Earth. So Moria, for those who may not have heard of it, it was the largest refugee camp in Europe, in Greece, in an island called Lesbos that burned down 2 years ago. And I used to work there, 2018 till 2021. I was working in the camp and then out of the camp once it burned down. So it's autobiographical fiction based on the stories that I came across while I was there. I also have myself in there as a character.
And have you been writing? We must talk about the camp, obviously, but have you been writing for long? Is this your first book?
It's my second, actually. The first one was published in 2019. It was a bit different. It was a middle grade novel about climate change. But it was like fantasy, getting kids to think about it through fantasy. So this is slightly different in that the age is different. It's probably, I would say, 16 plus. But I usually try to write around topics that I'm interested in, like social causes and stuff.
They do say yes, yeah, right about what you know. So what? Before we get onto the camp thing, what's your sort of background? Were your parents kind of politically aware, or what? Tell us your story.
Well, I'm originally from Iran. I came to London when I was 7 years old. Um, and my family, we stayed not as a refugee. I was a migrant. I was an immigrant. And actually, I start the preface of the book by saying, "Let me begin by confessing I am not a refugee." So there are some parts of the journey are similar with immigrants and refugees, but I acknowledge that for refugees, a lot of the journey is a lot tougher and a lot more difficult. So I moved here when I was 7, then we settled down in Spain a few years later, and then after I turned 18, I came back to the UK to go to university, and then I've sort of traveled and worked in different countries, the last one being Greece before coming back to London.
Yes. Do you think your sort of background has given you a bit of a wanderlust? Is that why you've sort of travelled a lot?
I think so, yeah, because I've been traveling since the age of 7, like, you know, well, I wouldn't want to say against my will. It wasn't so much up to me at that age. But later on, it became sort of a way of life, you know? And then just last year, I decided, okay, that's enough living out of the suitcase for me, and decided to settle down here in London. Also, I think working in the camp for this many, so I worked in Greece, not just in that camp. I had been working since 2017, so about 5 years in total. And it came to a point where I've started to feel I don't feel as needed here anymore. Whereas if I had left, let's say 2 years ago, at the height of the crisis, where there were more than 20,000 people in the camp, I would have felt like I need to go back and do my bit. So I mean, and there were many instances, on 3 instances I left, and actually I thought I'm not going back because it's quite intense, working in that context. And I thought I can't do this anymore. But something always kept dragging me back. So, but this time I think I've left for good for now.
And do you think you got that from your parents? I mean, did they do similar sorts of work?
Um, I mean, my parents, they've always been very philanthropic. They've been very involved in social causes, but work-wise, no. they're more in the business sort of world. Yeah, not in the humanitarian, but they've always been very, very interested in social causes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting as well, you know, because I slightly with my family, because my mother ended up running a young women's hostel in Birmingham, and my sister was a police cadet, and then my brother went into the ambulance. Anyway, just like it struck me, and I was a social worker for a while, residential social worker, and it just struck me how all of my siblings there must. That's why I'm asking you. There must be something in our background. I mean, Dad was a factory worker, and Mom was a housewife, so I'm not quite sure where it came from. But
Yeah.
what did you read at university? What did you study at university?
So I studied international relations at first at St. Andrews.
Ah,
Um, and then I studied there was like a master's, Erasmus Mundus master's, where you would go to 3 universities. I did something called Crossways in Cultural Narratives, which is very wordy, but it was pretty much like literature and philosophy. And the last thing, I also did a master's in Belgium in anthropology and development studies. And I think that really spurred my interest in working in organizations and like like I was working in Doctors Without Borders in Greece, and it was very much a critique of organizations. So it was quite grim in that it got you to think about how international organizations were born after colonialism and what they took from that. So it's a little bit grim, but it's really, really useful, I would say, if you work in the humanitarian field.
yeah, it sounds fascinating as well, actually, and well done. St Andrews is lovely, isn't it? One of my plays went up there. How fickle am I? Yeah, I went up to see it. St Andrews University. It's a lovely, lovely part of the world. And so,
It is.
what started you writing? I mean, did you always know that you wanted to write?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I've always been interested. Since I was like maybe 9 years old, and we did like a writing project for English class. At the time, my older brother was the only one who had a computer in the house, and he wouldn't let me use it very much. So, so my mom bought me a typewriter, and I remember I spent like a whole summer writing some murder mystery novels. Um, really, really bad ones, but so I've always been interested in writing since I was very young. And at uni I tried to look for like creative writing clubs, and always had this writing in the back of my mind, always tried to um structure my classes, my work, in order to have some time for writing as well. Trying to hone the skill, but at the same time I think I didn't have much to write about at the time, whereas with these experiences, it gave me sort of a wealth of ideas of what to write about.
And do you think you had half an eye when you thought, I'm going to do these particular jobs because it will give me material for writing? I'm probably being incredibly fickle there, but was there something in the back of your mind thinking, if I do something extremely dramatic, there's a story in that?
I mean, to be honest, at the time, I didn't even like, because when you're working there, you don't even have time to think about what you're doing, because things are happening so fast, and there's no time for reflection. At the time I just wanted, like, I would start like maybe here, then pressure would build up, I would reach like a tipping point, and I'd be like, I don't want anything to do with this work or this clinic or this line of work, and I would go away. I don't want to, like, I didn't want to think about it anymore. So it didn't occur to me at the time, but later, when I did have some time, like away, some time to reflect, then that's when I started to think about it. I started to think like, because actually the title of the book, The Five Stages of Moria, the structure of it came to me when I started to put things into perspective. So it's modeled around the 5 stages of grief. And I started to think of Moria as this traumatic experience, drawing at all these people together from all different walks of life. And I was like, it just clicked for me. Like, I could immediately tell, after having worked there for so long, who just arrived in the camp. So they were in an utter state of shock, who had been there already for a few months. They were feeling guilty, depressed. They couldn't put up with life anymore. So it was only after I'd spent some time away that I got some time to think about it, really, because there you just do, you know, you're just like running around, you know, doing this, doing that. You don't have time to think.
And how did you say, were you working in Greece anyway? How did you actually get involved in the camp?
I went so before Greece, I was working in Belgium, and I was so you know, following on from my I'd finished my international relations. I was doing my master's in development studies. And while I was doing my thesis, I got a traineeship in the it's called the European External Action Service, which sort of functions as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the European Commission. And I was in the branch that dealt with Afghanistan and Pakistan. And at the same time, I was still also I'd started volunteering with Afghan refugees in Brussels. And I think working there sort of made me realize I don't really want to work there, because it's very policy level, and it's very much about wearing suits, talking, and then not much getting done, basically, as is a lot of politics.
Yeah.
So while I was volunteering at the same time, I was seeing, like, you know, people have very, very basic needs, and here we are, you know, talking about the use of one word in a policy document. So it didn't really speak to me, that line of work. And at the same time, the EU-Turkey deal was signed while I was working there. And that's when the policy of containment came into place, whereas a lot of people were getting stuck on the islands in Greece, and they would end up staying in camps like Moria for many, many months, whereas these camps are constructed to be transitory. So it was because of the policy of containment. So there was a new crisis emerging. And it felt like I wanted to go there and help, because I speak Farsi. A lot of the refugees were from Afghanistan, so Dari, Farsi, very similar. Some of them from Iran, so I could speak the language. So I was looking for opportunities to go there. And I found one in 2017. I think it was spring, and I initially went to Athens to work for the Danish Refugee Council.
Wow, what a great story. We must talk. Did I drop the? I'm not sure if I've dropped this on you. Have you got a little bit of the book you could read for us?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so what we'll do, I'll just give you a sec anyway. So I'm Nick Hennegan. This is Residence 104.4 FM. We're also on bohemianbritain.com. I'm talking to Elika Ansari about her book, The Five Stages of Moria. I'll get it right one of these days. So we're going to hear, in fact, shall we do that now? Let's hear a little bit from your book, if that's okay.
Sure. So I've got a passage that I have in mind. So this is so the Five Stages of Moria, we have 5 characters, and one of them, it's my favorite character. It's a little girl. Her name is Ferishta, and she's Afghan. She's based on a girl that I knew, who basically risked her life to save her little brother from a fire. So this is one of the first fires that we had in Moria. Unfortunately, we have many, because it was not a very well built camp. So this is not the final one that destroyed the camp. So I'm going to read from Ferishta's chapter. The camp is burning. I don't know how it happened. All I know is that everyone is crying and screaming and running like mad people, especially the adults. My head hurts. The moment I smelled the smoke, I ran out of our caravan. I'm in the middle of hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Where is Mommy? I can hear her screaming my name. Ferishta! Ferishta! She seems lost. Ferishta means angel in Dari. Mommy says my birth was a gift from heaven, so that is why she named me Ferishta. Ferishta, where are you? She cries out for me over the crowd. I can see her now. She looks so sad when she's worried. She's been sad ever since we arrived in Moria, and I don't know what to do to help her. Sometimes, when she thinks me and my brother are asleep, she sobs quietly to herself. She thinks I don't hear her, but I do. I know she feels lonely sometimes. I was still very small when Baba passed away. May God rest his soul. Mommy has had to raise us without much proper support. At least back in Herat, she had my aunties and grandpa and grandma to help out sometimes. But when bad people attacked the village, we had no choice but to leave. Here, we have no family to help us. So she cries sometimes and I hear her. I want to tell her not to worry. I want to tell her that she's not alone, that I'm with her. I want to tell her I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm grown up and I can pull my weight too. Ferishte, I'm here, mommy. It's okay. I'm safe. I yell back, but she can't hear me. She just keeps turning on her heels in circles, stretching up on her tiptoes, trying to see over the crowds. I spot Kaka Abulfaz as he finds her. He's also shaking, but calms down when he sees she's okay. Then he says something which seems to relax her a bit too. He must have told her I'd made it out and not to worry. He's so nice, Kaka Abulfaz. Sometimes, when mommy's too busy to go to the food line, he shares some of his own food with us. He does act a bit young when he's with his friends, but when it comes to us and mommy, he's so caring and mature. Mohsen really likes him too, because he can just sit and play with him for hours. I wish Kaka Abulfaz was my father and he would always stay to help mommy and play with Mohsen. Mohsen is my little brother. He's 5, but mommy still treats him like a baby. When I was 5, I was already helping mommy clean the house and wash our clothes. Once, when mommy was nursing Mohsen back to sleep after one of his usual nightmares about the bad men who attacked our village, I asked her who she loved more, me or Mohsen. She waved me away casually. Don't ask silly questions, Ferishta. I'm not in the mood. Now she calls Mohsen's name. That's when I notice he's not there with mommy. It's strange not to see him by mommy's side. They're usually inseparable. Even when I want to hold mommy's hand, he always gets to her first, and I get angry at him sometimes. But mommy tuts and says I'm older, so I should be patient. Selfish, thoughtless Mohsen. It's just like him to go missing at such a moment and worry mommy. She's beginning to panic. I can see it in her shaking body, and to be honest, so am I. He may be annoying sometimes, but he's still my little brother. Where are you, Mohsen? I stop to look around and see no sign of him. He's usually so loud that you can't help but notice him, even over hundreds of screaming people. My heart stops beating when I remember the last place I saw him, in our caravan. We go to sleep at the same time, but he always falls asleep before me, and I watch him as he does, just to make sure he's breathing okay. What if he's still in there? The flames are getting bigger now, and I can see them approaching our caravan. I see mommy looking in the same direction. Then as realization dawns on her, she starts pushing and shoving people out of her way like a mad woman. People hold her back. It's too dangerous, they say. He'll be gone by the time you get there, they say. You'll kill yourself. Mommy is frantic. I've never seen her like this. We're all she has, Mohsen and I can't let her lose him like she lost Baba. So I brace myself and dash through the gaps between the crowds and back up the slope before anyone can stop me. I dive into the smoke. There's too much commotion. I feel like I'm in a haze. In seconds, my throat and nostrils are in pain, my eyes begin to tear, and smoke enters my lungs. I pull the hem of my shirt up to cover my nostrils, but I've already breathed in too much of it, so it's not long before my body begins to crunch. I'm coughing in fits. I hold my breath and enter our caravan through its unhinged door. Beyond the thick smoke, I spot him, doubled over in the corner, poor little Mohsen. He's crying so hard but stops for a moment and when he spots me. Hang on, little brother, I'm coming for you.
Wow. Blimey, that's fairly dramatic. Does he get out? No, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to say anymore. That's brilliant. I mean, we must talk about that because we're talking about the book, The Five Stages of Moria. Moria is a real camp. We'll talk about the process of how you got a publishing deal as well, or whether you're self-publishing and what you think about all that. But I haven't actually seen the book. It's such a confession. I haven't seen the book yet. That's my fault for not being all over the place, for not being in the right place. But just I must ask you, because at the moment in you know, as you know, in the UK, we've got a lot of listeners and viewers. Oh, you can watch us, by the way, on YouTube. Oh yeah, we're in vision. Oh yes, we are. You'll know that if you're listening in stereo. Yes, we're on YouTube and we're also on bohemianbritain.com in glorious Technicolor. But we've got a lot of people who follow this very kindly from all over the world, including actually, we've got someone in Iran. who keeps emailing. Anyway, you won't know it.
Really?
Yeah, right. But so just tell us, and there's a lot of political rhetoric being spouted at the moment about, it's the old, I mean, I won't get too political about it, but the old thing about immigrants and, you know, coming over here and they're just economic migrants and they're just after a better life. And I was listening to the news today, and I say I won't get too political about it, but you've been there. Tell us at first hand who these people are and why they're there.
These people, Nick, could be anyone. It could be you, it could be me. We had musicians, we had television hosts, we had lawyers, doctors, we had builders, we had working class, middle class, upper class. When they got to Moria, all of that was gone because Moria was a huge equalizer in that people had to start from scratch. They were there because, and this is a huge point to stress, nobody would leave their country unless they saw no other way of making a living for themselves and their family. Nobody would put their kids, their wives, their friends, themselves on a boat, you know, on a rubber dinghy that could sink at any moment. Nobody would go through that trauma. Nobody would put up with a place like Moria unless they had no other choice. And this is, you know, we talk about economic migrants. These are just words, basically. I mean, sometimes poverty is much more violent than war. It can be much more violent than war. Sometimes poverty leads to war. Sometimes war always leads to poverty. I mean, these are just words that we use to sort of classify migrants and refugees into different, you know, put different labels on them and decide to, you know, extend help to certain groups and to withhold it from others. One of the biggest groups of refugees that we have in Britain are Iranians. Look at what's happening in Iran right now. There is much like, you know, we did extend support to Ukrainian refugees. That in the same manner, we should do the same to all other refugees, you know, finding safe routes for them to come here, finding sponsorship schemes to, you know, put them up somewhere safe. It should not go to a specific category of refugees. That's discriminatory.
And without sort of putting you on the spot, because I know you're in the caring side of it, what do you say to people who say, well, hang on, the people that are coming over the channel now have come from a safe country, so somewhere like France or you know, anywhere else in Europe. So why do they need to come to the UK specifically? How would you answer that criticism, if it is?
I mean, there's always a reason. I mean, the same was said in Greece, that Turkey is a safe country, but there's always things we don't see. I mean, there were so many claims of people getting shot at while trying to, and not aiming to kill, just scaring them. I mean, these are anecdotal. Unfortunately, there's no hard evidence because nobody would own up to it. But Turkey was certainly not a safe country for lots of immigrants. There were like people, like reports of them getting sent back to their countries. Asylum systems in different countries, although we all not Britain anymore, but the EU abides by the EU asylum laws. Even in Belgium, the rate of acceptance for asylum applications was vastly different between when the Dutch authorities assessed the claim and when the French authorities assessed the claim. So if we're all following the same asylum laws and procedures, then how can we account for such a huge difference? There are many reasons why people cross the channel. They may have family here, they may have there might be other opportunities here, there may be thousands of reasons. I don't think we can account for the Dublin regulation, which very unfairly states that certain countries need to be responsible for all the asylum claims that come through. And that puts pressure on countries like Italy and Greece, which themselves are struggling economically. I think there's a lot of things to be reassessed here. And it's just finding a way to sort of take away responsibility from countries like the UK because they're harder to reach, you know.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, again, it's such a massive thing. And thank you for that, because it is interesting. But let's talk about, oh, look at the time, blimey. Let's talk a little bit about what's the nitty gritty, the real people. You work there day in, day out. I mean, does it start? Is it an early morning start? Are people happy? Are they? It's interesting you were saying you could tell when someone had just arrived, because they were. Well, just tell us what's the day-to-day life like in a refugee camp.
It's very complicated because so one thing that I would say, it depends on the population, the numbers that are there at a given time. At a time where we had 20,000 people in a camp that's built for a maximum 3,000 to 4,000, it was all about lining up, you know, queues for this, for that, for doctor, for legal support, for the, you know, and spending hours in the line. So basically people would think about, schedule their day in terms of which lines they should be standing in throughout the day. They would divide up their resources, like, you know, father goes to this line, mother goes to this line, you know. It's very, very hectic. People are often quite disappointed, on the edge, rightly so. They don't know who to take their frustrations out on, especially if they've been there for a while. They seem to be getting nowhere. Initially, maybe they're a bit more motivated, but after months and months of uncertainty, not knowing when it's going to come to an end, they're just frustrated overall. And whoever they go to for support, especially NGOs, because of course what we can do is limited. We're non-governmental. We function within the remits of the government and the national laws. Whoever they go to take out their frustrations, we say, this is not on us, this is nothing to do with us, this is the government. So there's really nobody there who can answer to their frustrations, basically. It's really, I would say it's really difficult. It's a long waiting process. And there's some of that in the book, is reflected in the book, that the waiting basically is the worst part, I think, for a lot of people. Because if they were given a date, you know, on this date, you will be out of here, they could deal with that. But it's the not knowing. It's the, like, maybe, you know, maybe I'm stuck here forever. Who knows? You know,
I mean,
that's the worst part.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
the fact sorry, no, sorry to interrupt. I'm just worried about the time all of a sudden. We could talk for hours, actually. But I mean, I guess the fact that you've chosen to write this book means you must be, is it fair to say you're very fond of most of the people that you met in the camp?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not only fond of them, I look up to them. They're an inspiration. The resilience that I saw in them, some of the children there, I mean, it's a kind of resilience that other people can only dream of. It's basically having gone through it all by the age of 8. It's quite disheartening, but at the same time, it's very, very inspiring. You know, to see these children grow up and then go on to make a life for themselves after all they've been through.
Yeah, I think it's important, isn't it, that we took, these are people, these aren't just statistics. And I in a small way, there's one or two people that I remember from when I was a social worker years ago, who still in touch with them. It's great to see that they've got on. You've got the book out. Where can we find out more about you, and where can we buy the book, where, for instance, if we want to do that?
Well, I'm on social media, Elika Ansari, everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The book is available on Amazon. It's available on the publisher's website. The publisher's called Artbound. It's also available, it should be available on most bookshop websites. Also in store in London. It should be available in Daunt in Marylebone soon. It should be available in Waterstones, Piccadilly.
All good books,
yeah,
all good bookshops. But so the best way to find out more about you is then Elika Ansari on social media. We've got to wrap up. It's taken so long to get to meet you eventually. I'm so delighted that we have done. But thank you so much for coming in. Well, for coming on, as it were. It's sort of one of the glories of the new technology. We're doing this online. Elika Ansari, The 5 Stages of Moria. is available now. Thank you again for your time. And we've run out of it. So that's it. I shall see you next time. I'm Nick Hennegan, and on bohemianbritain.com, we're also, of course, Literary London on Resonance 104.4 FM.